is
But
that
can I stop you there a minute? Aren't we in violation of that anyway, because it's been since 2004 that we haven't done this, and we're a month away from 2009?
and there's a definite issue in that regard.
You know, but wouldn't it be?
We need to get the elements, the requirements that are set forth in that housing element completed before we can move on. This is one that's been out there and it needs to be finished. And our own language of our housing element requires us to do a mandatory type inclusionary housing ordinance. Now, it may be that when you revise the housing element in the next phase, you can take that language out or reword it in some way, and then you're going to be able to come back and look at your mandatory inclusionary housing ordinance, and you can modify it at that point. But we need to get some of these elements completed before we move on to the next the housing element revision.
Well, I'm calling it 10:30. I'm not really.
So if the board takes the action that or accepts your motion and adopts your motion, you're going to be in violation of your housing element.
Well, if I change the motion to say that we basically move forward to put in our 2009 housing element a voluntary and inclusionary housing ordinance.
What I would suggest that if I don't want to talk about policy with you, but what I suggest is that you deal with the ordinance at hand, and your motion should be direct staff to come back or not, on the 9th for adoption of the first reading of the ordinance. And then you can also direct staff to, in the future, to look at, how you want to address the housing element in the new, revised version. But at this point, you have to deal with the ordinance that's before you.
Supervisor Delmore.
Thank you. Is there any reason why we can't, at this point, make a request to amend our housing element? We have to shoot ourselves first, then come back and say, now can we have a Band-Aid? I don't think so. I think we can say, look, this gun's loaded and we don't want it to go off. Therefore want to amend the ordinance or our housing element. We don't have to wait the statutory 5 years to amend it. We can seek to amend it anytime we want.
Well,
so why not start that amendment process now?
I'll let staff speak to that, but we're in the process of now engaging in dialogue and revisions to the housing element. But we haven't even completed the requirements that we set forth for ourselves in the last housing element.
And we haven't built the hundreds of homes that the state says we have to build, too. So at what point does logic come into play? If we have something that's just not doable, then we ought to be able to go back to the state and say, it's not doable, folks, and we want to amend it. And start that process today. I don't see where that's impossible. And tell them, we recognize we screwed up 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And goal we set for ourselves, this isn't workable.
Did I hear the L word? Logic?
I know.
Okay. Supervisor Smith is next.
Well, I think we need to move this along, and I think, Mr. Chair, if we could hear from you on where you feel we need to be on this. We haven't heard from you. I think we need to either vote this up and vote it down. It can be brought back next year. We need to get on with this, and I don't know why board members are not listening to council. She opined, and Ms. Glassy verified at the outset of this discussion that we needed to have this mandatory component. I mean, it's been vetted by council. She gave that opinion. Why are we wasting everyone's time? We needed to hear from the public. We heard from the public. We took input. Everyone knows this document is going to be changed next year. We're going to have a new housing element, but I'm sure Ms. Hillegas could tell us what's going to happen if we try to amend our previously adopted housing element at the 15th hour, and we're out of compliance with so many components of it. There have been lawsuits involved. I mean, it's like, what part of affordable housing does this board not understand? I mean, I think this is absurd. So I think we need to hear from the chair. Is he willing to get something done in 2009? We're going to either vote this up or vote it down, and let's go forward. So, I'd like to hear from the chair. Either we're going to give the recommendation that council just advise us to tell staff to get this to us for a first reading on November 9th, or not. So I think we need to know if that's going to go forward.
Thank you. Supervisor Pinches.
What if I was to make a motion that said we move forward for a strictly voluntary, inclusionary housing ordinance when we move forward with our 2009 housing element redate. I mean, this has been going on since 2004. What's another month going to have to do with it? I mean, I wasn't here in 2004, 5, and 6, and here in the last 2 years, now this is kind of the first I've heard about it, that, all of a sudden, that's another question the public should know. Why did nothing go on from 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, and here we're at one more month only left in 2008, but that's kind of past tense. But we have a problem here. I think we need, as Supervisor Koufax said, it means nothing. It means nothing. So why would we want to adopt it and formalize it when he stated very clearly it means nothing, and I totally agree. So I'm not going to adopt something and put it in a law form, which is an ordinance, for something that means something and is not right. I mean, and getting back to our previous direction, it was a majority of the board that said they wanted something come back that was strictly voluntary. And we don't see that.